POV, you just finished Unit 12, and your brain is doing a full vibe check on World War II and the Cold War era. Bet. Let's get into it, no cap, because this unit is just giving us so much main character energy. First things first, World War II. It kicked off in 1939 and wrapped up in 1945. But the US? We weren't feeling the drama at first. We joined the chat a bit later, from 1941 to 1945. So, who was on whose team in this global skirmish? We had the Allied powers, the United States, with President Franklin D. Roosevelt holding it down. Then there was Britain, led by the iconic Winston Churchill, who was just giving off serious leadership vibes. And don't forget Russia, with Joseph Stalin in charge. On the flip side, the Axis powers were Germany, fronted by the notorious Adolf Hitler, Italy, with Benito Mussolini, and Japan, led by Emperor Hirohito. This squad was not playing nice, F4. Now, why did the US finally jump into the fray? Before 1941, we were just chilling, trying to stay neutral, passing all these neutrality laws from 1939 to 1941. Like, nah, we good, you guys handle it. But then, boom, Pearl Harbor. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on our naval base in Hawaii. And let me tell you, that attack hit different. It was like, okay, fine, we're in. Game on. This event lives rent-free in American history textbooks for a reason. Back home, while the war was raging, some serious changes were happening. The Fair Employment Practice Committee, or FEPC, was created to help African Americans find jobs in wartime industries and made sure they weren't facing discrimination based on race. It was a step, trying to keep things fair even when the world was upside down. And you know what else was everywhere? War propaganda posters. These posters were like the original viral content, trying to persuade U.S. citizens to support the war effort. They were telling people to buy war bonds to fund everything from feeding troops to buying tanks. They wanted folks to take jobs in wartime industries, especially women. Remember Rosie the Riveter? She was giving us all the strength and independence vibes, encouraging women to step up and work in factories. People were also pushed to conserve resources, like carpooling, planting victory gardens, and collecting scrap metal. Every little bit helped, and the posters really got that message across. But not everything on the home front was sunshine and roses. The U.S. did something pretty controversial with Japanese Americans and other immigrants from Japan. They were put into internment camps, essentially restricting their freedom. This was a dark chapter, and it was even upheld by the Supreme Court in the case Korematsu v. United States. The court basically said, hey, individual rights can be restricted if there's a clear and present danger. Wild, right? Talk about a tough pill to swallow. To try and stay neutral initially, we had cash and carry. This program was like, hey, other countries can buy goods from us, but you gotta bring your own cash to pay for it, and you gotta transport it yourself. We weren't trying to get tangled up in shipping conflicts. But then came the Lend-Lease program. This was basically our way of supporting Great Britain without technically breaking our neutrality. The U.S. would lend military aid to countries whose defense was vital to our security. So we'd lend arms to Britain, and they'd pay us back after the war in kind. It was like, here, borrow my weapon, just give it back later, but on a massive global scale. And all this war needed money, obviously. That's where war bonds came in. People bought these bonds, and that money went straight to funding the war effort, paying troops, feeding them, getting them equipment like planes and tanks, taking care of injured soldiers, you name it. War bonds were funding it. Even Florida played a huge role. It wasn't just beaches and sunshine, it was a major training ground for troops. Over 100 bases popped up, training pilots and soldiers. Hotels were even repurposed to house troops and help injured soldiers recover. The Florida coast also had to deal with German submarines, which were giving serious scare vibes. So the Florida Civil Defense Organization started blacking out the coast to keep submarines from spotting our ships. Let's talk about some major operations now. D-Day, also known as Operation Overlord, was iconic. On June 6, 1944, American, British, and Canadian forces landed on 5 beaches in Normandy, France. It was one of the largest amphibious military assaults ever, like seriously massive. They even ran a huge deception campaign to trick the Germans about where they were going to land. By late August, northern France was liberated. This was basically the beginning of the end for the war in Europe, giving serious victory vibes. And before that, we had Operation Torch, which was the Allied invasion of French North Africa. This gave the Allied forces a super important base of operations in North Africa, a real strategic win. Now let's fast forward a bit. The war ends, but the drama doesn't. We enter the Cold War from 1946 to 1991. This was a super tense standoff between the US and the Soviet Union, like an ultimate staring contest with nuclear weapons. We had an arms race where both sides were just building up their arsenals, giving everyone anxiety about nuclear bombs. People in the US were taught how to react if a bomb dropped, and many even built bomb shelters. Imagine that fear living rent-free in people's minds every day. During this Cold War era, something else wild was happening. The House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC. This committee investigated alleged communist activity in the US. They basically used their subpoena power to call citizens to testify, creating an intimidating atmosphere that sometimes led to questionable revelations. This contributed to a lot of fear and distrust, especially in the 1950s, which was giving serious McCarthyism vibes, where people like Joseph McCarthy often trampled on individual rights, suspecting everyone of being a communist. It's giving paranoia. But hey, after WW2, there were some good things too, especially for our veterans. The GI Bill, or Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, was a game changer. It gave vets free education, like college or technical school, special loans to buy homes, and free health care. This led to a huge demand for housing, and boom, suburbia was born. New suburban homes popped up outside the cities. Families moved there, women often stayed home, and men commuted to work. This era led to a larger middle class and a stronger economy. And get this, more babies were born, about 4 million a year between 1946 and 1964. These kids, they're the original baby boomers. However, while suburbs thrived, cities often struggled, and African Americans were still segregated, not experiencing the suburban dream. Speaking of women, Betty Friedan enters the chat in the 1960s. Her book, The Feminine Mystique, dropped in 1963 and totally broke new ground. She explored the idea of women finding personal fulfillment outside of traditional roles, which was like, wait, women can do more than just be housewives? Revolutionary. She co-founded the National Organization for Women, or NOW, and was a huge pioneer for feminism and the women's rights movement. She was just giving off fierce advocacy energy. And finally, a quick vibe check on blue-collar versus white-collar.
Blue-collar workers traditionally do manual labor or manufacturing, often getting their hands dirty. Think factory workers or construction. White-collar workers, on the other hand, usually work in offices, in service industries behind a desk. They're often perceived to have more education and higher pay. It's a way to categorize different social classes based on the kind of work they do, FRFR. And that's your Unit 12 review, packed with all the historical tea and a little bit of brainrot spice. Stay informed, stay smart, and keep those brain cells thriving. You got this.